Hello everyone and welcome to the Keshe Plasma Reactor group. Once again, it's Tuesday night. It's always Tuesday night at Keshe Plasma Reactor group, and it's July 25th in this case, 2015. Okay, so as usual, we have a bunch of people here that are anxious to show things and explain things and question things and so on. So let's just dive in and see what we have lined up for today. I notice Lee Coates is here. Do you have anything you would like to present off the bat today, Lee?
I got nothing new to present really. If John shows up, I'd like to talk about
if John shows up. I was just putting my headphones on. John, that's really? Maybe. Maybe you have to apply a strong maggrav field first and disable all the computer chips and start from there. Maybe they're all counteracting each other. Who knows, eh? Oh yeah, a little sort of tiny one, or oops.
in the newer cars that they're not, doesn't seem to be working at all. So
Speaking of not working, I didn't have my audio on the live stream while you were expounding about that, but just to recap, basically you we're testing different units and we're finding various results, I guess, depending on application, and found that the ones with the computer chips weren't working so well, but the maggrav units in the older vehicles were
cars
working
with
real
computer
good.
chips in them.
Right.
That
Control
the fuel flows.
Right. People have mentioned that before, because we do have the automatic adjusting systems in all the new vehicles with fuel injection, where if your air supply or fuel supply is restricted in some way, it will try to compensate in any way it can to balance out the air-fuel ratios again. So
yeah, I was just doing a basement renovation for a mechanic, and got to chatting with him about computers and stuff. And of course, mechanics don't want to touch anything to do with the computer system, maybe other than replace the sensor. But
yeah, they don't
couldn't
like
offer me any advice.
Yeah, generally mechanics won't be dabbling with the computer system. They will be getting the information out of the computer quite often nowadays, and using that information to make a diagnosis and that sort of thing. But yeah, they don't like to play with the computer, because it's usually worth $1,000 to $2,000, and one wrong move with static electricity and you've zapped the computer, and your either your car or your customer's car will be dead in the water, as they say.
I was thinking, is there some way to bypass the sensor, or maybe maybe block some airflow to the airflow sensor or something like that.
Absolutely, you can do that. There's people that put in resistors in the circuit with the airflow or air fuel sensor, which is sometimes called an oxygen sensor. But the oxygen sensor is actually downstream, and the air fuel sensor is an upstream one, and they look the same, but they can be fooled in essence to give you to bypass the system. People that put in high performance injectors and other parts will sometimes try to bypass the system so they can dial in their engine to get more power, and they don't care about the extra air pollution or whatever else, fuel mileage and that sort of thing doesn't matter.
This mechanic I was talking to was saying you can actually get your vehicle chipped, as well. He said chipped. There's various chips you can get installed by the dealer to improve fuel mileage and various other things, but it costs about $6,000 to get your vehicle chipped, so it's rare that anybody does it.
Well, yeah, you can buy chips for in the hundreds of dollars up to the thousands of dollars, yeah. But generally that'll be for a different purpose, although some people now have been doing the HHO thing, hydrogen oxygen combination, or just straight hydrogen, and injecting that into engines, and apparently that can alter the fuel system. You can make it appear too rich or lean, and then the system has to compensate, so it ends up you might not save the fuel savings that you would have in the older vehicles that didn't have all the fancy computer equipment and so on. But there are ways you can bypass that to sort of disable it or partially disable it for certain purposes.
So has the Keshe Foundation store had problems with air car units, or that you've heard of?
Not that I know of. I haven't gotten too many reports in the testimonials about the car units. There's quite a few reports of people's own homemade units, and most people are, in fact everyone that I remember has been quite enthusiastic about their car units and whatnot. And there's quite a few testimonials in the Golden Age of GANs and some of the other Facebook posts and whatnot as well. Yeah, if people out there do have some sort of report on the official Keshe Foundation car MagRav unit or the house MagRav unit, if you can get a hold of me somehow, I can put it into the testimonials site of the Keshe Foundation. So, and you should be able to get a hold of me in the usual ways with either Rick Crammond or through the Keshe Foundation or other ways. I'm more or less a public name now, so you can find me. Yeah, anybody else have any feedback about that from their experience?
Well, that's all I got then, Rick, for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Okay, who would like to grab the spotlight next here? Now's your big opportunity.
I'll go ahead and talk about the deuterium GANs real quick.
All right, great, thank you.
If you don't mind.
If you could just say who you are and where you're from there, David.
Yeah, David from Arizona.
Thank you.
I had been on one of the previous workshops or plasma reactor groups and had mentioned that I'd been working with the deuterium GANs, and during one of the experiences I had with it rotating, so it was basically rotating the deuterium GANs, being in the presence of it and just observing in a non-thought sort of meditative state the field around the unit, that I had perceived what, from my past experiences, I would describe as possibly the beginning stages of a vision, meaning that the field of view, my entire field of view, essentially was taken up by a transparent overlay of white light, and the white light had a pattern to it, and it was kind of bouncing between, I don't know, somewhere between a couple of percent transparency up to maybe 7, 8, 10%, somewhere in that range. But it kind of would fade in, fade out, fade in, and fade out. But as it got stronger, when it got to the stronger levels of it, to me, it looked like I was looking at structures, different structures, like maybe a table, a sofa. I can't say 100%, but it felt very much like I was looking into another room at another location, is what it looked like to me. So, but when I've seen visions through meditation, sometimes it will start like that. They will kind of build from a more, trying to think of the word, from kind of like a shadowy kind of perspective to a stronger, sharper perspective. And it felt very much like that was sort of possibly what was occurring. The other possibility would be, Keshe's talked about teleportation. Sure, could have been the early stages of teleportation, like physical teleportation, or it could have just been more like consciousness teleportation. But I had to say that as a recap real quick, because that was in another workshop that I talked about this. But the thing I want to update is I had given some of this deuterium GANs to a friend, and I believe his experience kind of aligns with what I just described in terms of my experience. Um, but basically, he was holding the GANs, the deuterium GANs, in his hand. He was using his other hand to pull energy from the environment and push it into his chest, kind of repeatedly, as he was walking around the house. And in tandem to this, he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone, and his girlfriend lives in another state, and he's been there, several times, but he's not overly familiar with the area. But he was talking to her, and so they're having this conversation. And at one point, she's running around town doing some stuff, and there was going to be a long pause. And he's like, "Oh, that's fine, no problem. I'll just hold on the line." So he's doing that activity while he's more focused on the deuterium GANs in his hand and pumping energy into his chest. And he's just kind of walking around the house waiting for something, for her to come back on the phone. And all of a sudden, he starts to see very clearly in his mind's eye a woman, uh, and her face, like really clear. And then it kind of disappears, and then it kind of reappears and disappears and reappears. But every time it appears, it's very clear. And he said it happened over maybe, I think he said, like a couple of minute period of time, like every second or two, it would pop in and pop out. So it was very persistent. And when he saw the woman's face, he was like, I know this woman, but I can't place where I've seen her before. And then at some point during that process, he said he started to smell this really overwhelmingly powerful aroma. And he's somebody who doesn't eat sweets. He hasn't eaten sweets for like decades. But he's somewhat familiar with them. He's not like an expert with sweet smells, and this was a sweet smell. And he was like, "Man, this smell is kind of familiar, but I can't place it, and it's really powerful, really overwhelming." And as this is happening, at some point, probably within a minute or two, I'm not really sure, his girlfriend, who's in transit somewhere, um, starts to have a conversation with another woman, and he realizes, oh wait, that's her friend. And then he realizes, oh, that's the friend. That's the friend that he may have only interacted with briefly because his girlfriend lives in another state, so he probably hasn't had much opportunity to be around this friend of hers. But basically, he immediately remembered, oh, that's the friend of hers, the face that I'm seeing. And then the girl says to his girlfriend, "Here, take these brownies." And he's like, "Oh my God, that's it. The brownie smell is what I've been smelling." And he said that after a couple minutes, but he said the brownie smell the aroma stayed with him for hours, and it was really strong. So to me, that is in alignment with some of my experiences, but it didn't quite go to the same level. It was for me, when I was having the experience, I felt like the field effect was not coherent enough or stable enough to manifest in a strong enough way to quite go to that level that he experienced. But I thought it was very interesting, so I just thought I would share that information.
All right, thank you, David. That's good to see that sort of perspective. Anything else you you have from that end? Oh, what about the your secret formula for deuterium GaNs, by the way?
Well, the GaNs was given to me by a friend to work with, so I would just follow what's already been instructed through the workshops. The substance is like a black, very black, oily, very oily kind of substance.
Oily, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can anyone here remind me what the process is for making deuterium GaNs?
So my understanding is you use CH3, you set up a CH3 kit, a standard kit. You use power with the kit. You take the power to a higher level than normal to push it from an orange color GaNs to more of a black color GaNs. Now there's, from what I recall in the workshop, John, or let me try to think, because John and Armin were talking. So Armin, I believe, said that you should put the positive lead to the chicken wire and the negative lead to the, oh wait, I'm sorry, hold on. No, it's the other way around. The negative lead to the chicken wire and the positive lead to the nano-coated copper plate. I know of other people who've done it the opposite, so I'm just saying Armin suggested that way. Other people might do it a different way. So, but basically it's just a CH3 kit with more power to it to where you get more of a black material, is my understanding, forming in the kit.
Okay, can anyone else add to that? What about using, you're supposed to bubble any oxygen in or other plates involved, or technique or anything special that anyone can remember?
From what I remember, Rick, David has described it pretty good.
Okay.
I've tried that, about 6 months ago and got some black GaNs, but I did, at that time I didn't realize it was deuterium, so
at that time you didn't realize you had spaceship reactor material there for
that's right. I was just trying to make CH3 with power, and I ended up with something black.
You didn't realize it was your ticket off the planet, eh?
And I haven't tried to repeat it here this month, but that's on my list of things to do.
Yes, right. We have strange lists of things to do when we're involved with the Keshe Foundation. Must make deuterium GaNs, etc. All right, well, that was interesting. Anything else about that, or shall we move on to perhaps Mark? Or if someone else has something they'd like to say or present. Okay, so how about it, Mark? You got anything going on today? Is it too early for you?
Da, 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 da.
You see,
I don't know what I should do, because I know we're supposed to be in a stand down mode.
well,
but you know how hard that has been for somebody like myself.
well, you just have to approach it differently and use different words and throw in peace every once in a while, and then everything will be fine.
Well, I believe that was our very first intention, and I'm sure that we have to keep going back to that. Because new people keep on coming into the program here, and we have to, our whole mission statement is peace. And if the very first steps of these projects were, we talked about the hope for peace was presented to us before these materials and all these ideas. The hope of a peaceful way of introducing things to people, that we can give things to them instead of having to fight for them or be hated for having them. If we could all be, if some of these technologies could make us more equal, it would equal peace. And before we can achieve peace, we had to learn what peace was before we could learn what these technologies could do for us. They could provide something. I think they can provide some things for us. This is just my analogy of the last couple of years. And it's hard, you have to, there's a lot of deciphering that you have to do when you listen to these things. But I think for myself, when it gets right down to the nitty gritty, when the rubber meets the pavement, people that put their, not money, but their time and effort in showing that peace is a part of it, because you're replacing your efforts by doing this instead of doing the other things that you used to do that didn't benefit people. Watching TV, going to the bar. I mean, that's self-serving in a way, and that's fine. And this was a way to kind of allow us to interact more broadly, I think, with more people in a peaceful way. So
yeah, absolutely, I agree.
This was part of the whole deal, right from the very get-go. If you listen to some of the very first teachings, I mean, Caroline, I can tell you a story, and I still adhere to it today. Is one of the very first things I remember, to be connected to anything we do, be part of it. I still, when I need a batch of salt to start to make my GANs, I put my feet in the water, in the hot water, and I am now connected. She said that was a great way to connect your soul to the water, and here we go from there. And I still adhere to some of these things, and these are just small, and it's so peaceful to have your feet in hot water with salt, and you feel so good, and it's relaxing, and what a great way to just either start the day or end the day. I mean, really.
Have you ever wondered that maybe she meant the sole of your foot, not your soul? I wonder sometimes.
Yes.
No,
So,
I'm sure that was.
Words we use are double entendres.
Yeah, true. Sometimes in the higher levels, that's the way it goes. Things get really ironic really quickly with names, and things flip around and whatnot. So anything can work that way. But yes, you've taken that to heart and soul, so to speak, and have used that as your primary technique, I guess, all the way along. Is that true?
Absolutely. It's been a guideline now for me. I mean, I always, for conversation's sake, people would ask me, I live in Detroit, Michigan. That's where I reside. And it's pretty violent, by nature, I guess. You hear the stories, but to me, I don't feel threatened. But people ask me, "Oh, do you have a gun?" And I say, "No. Why would I spend my money on a gun and bullets?" And they say, "Well, you live in Detroit. Everybody should have a gun."
Yeah.
And I say to them, "Well, if I had a gun, then I'd have to use it. And if I had to use it, that means I'd have to shoot somebody. And that would be, in my idea of a life, to shoot somebody with a gun with my money, it just doesn't make sense to me at all." And to try to tell people that here in Detroit, they think I'm ludicrous. They think I'm crazy. I got five guns. I carry three.
I carry three, yeah. Yeah, well, that's right. And they just had I think a couple of days ago, they had the was it 50-year celebration of the riots of 1967 in Detroit when everything burned. And I was in Flint in 1970, what would it be, well, roughly 8 and 10 years later from that. And it was pretty violent then. I remember there was some kind of shootout between the local biker gang and the police. And this kind of thing was going on. Students would get sort of assaulted on just walking down the street, and this, all the rumors that I would hear as an engineering student back then in Flint. Yeah, so I mean, it's come a long ways in a way, and it's
well, there's actually they're having a story come out, and I don't want to say they glorify the fact of, you know, the fighting and all that, but they make the movie of it. And people are going to pay money to hear. But what the sad part about it is that the true people that reported on at the time when the actual riots happened, some of the real reporters here, local reporters, went back to these old timers and said, and had a talk with them. And one guy struck me so dear. He said, we stood in these corners reporting this ugliness, and 50 years later, I'm still standing at on the same exact corner, and they put picture to picture, side by side. Here he was, a young man, and here he is, an old man, and and it still looked the same. The blight 50 years later, and he said, and like he said, people say that we've come a long way. Well, we're a long way from what? Or a long way to where? And he said, if it was my hope, at least we can achieve, to clean up our city to this point. We still have buildings that, if you really dug deep, they're still the burned out buildings from the time of the riots. People will not go in those areas. They're very dangerous. You do not want to go in those areas where those riots first started. It's still the same way. It's very dangerous. And I pray for people that have this. There's people that have to live there. They have no choice. So I thought, and that was another thing I thought when I started this technology, because we talked about making little love energy balls. And I thought, well, man, what a great thing what I could do to make a little energy, peaceful energy ball and give it to, because we have a lot of problems at gas stations. And I thought, what a great thing. They wouldn't even know it. I could just toss it up on top of the roof and just have love energy ball on top of these decrepit gas stations in Detroit, and everybody that goes there picks up the love. And then, we have discussed, we have to ask the people for their permission to share the love. You just don't throw things about the universe. It's just, don't do that. That's not the right thing to do. Just, don't pour Gans water in the water just because you think that's the right thing to do. If you approach it in a peaceful way and you prepared your Gans water for a peaceful application to water, then you will find that it'll be a little bit more applicable for the environment to say, you're saying thank you to already what it already has. Where instead of sitting there going like, I'm going to heal you by making my Gans. And nature goes like, I've already made the Gans and I'm giving it to you. Who's healing who?
Who's healing who there, big guy? Yeah.
So yeah, we're just little babes in a big woods. So for me, I've tried to keep I made some things, some health things, and I gave them out, and it really felt good. But I had a little project that I was so close to completing that it was just a few more steps, and I didn't really make anything new or build anything, or I just kind of put some Ganses. I just filled some Ganses up, and I just connected some wires. Really, all I did. So I don't know how that applies. If I overreached my boundary, but it was just I've never made a complete magrav. Everybody has magravs, small ones that are attached to this or attached to that, but I went for the bigger picture, and my brain was so out on my huge unit that I never really got around to making just a 3-stacker unit. Never did it. And I was so close to completing it when Mr. Keshe said, could you sit back for a month? I'm going like, you gotta be kidding me! Please. So then when John and everybody started saying, well, you know, and then I listened to that one session with 10 p.m., date 10, p.m. 10, where Mr. Keshe talked about, you know, these reactors are definitely something that can aid us in a peaceful way. It can. I'm sure he doesn't want to say they can probably hurt us too in a harmful way if people, you know, get together and start pouring, you know, negative energy into them, because these are just probably more than likely just sending and receiving units, and if you work with them long enough, certain things are going to manifest from them, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get tritium and deuterium, and you know, we're trying to separate elements from from different elements to go to a higher level. So I'm sure that, you know, in everything in life, there's a minuses and positive and minuses, and I'm sure the dark forces are just as gonna always be on your tail. If you're gonna be a good guy, you're gonna always feel like there's gonna be somebody that's, you know, coming nipping at your heels because because they don't like, for some reason, unless we hopefully someday we'll be able to not to have that feeling of somebody nipping at our heels, if that makes sense.
Well, maybe the new way of going is we just go positive and don't worry about the nippers, basically. So it's a matter of what can withstand a field of, say, unconditional love or that sort of principal plasma kind of field. All you can do is put up a plasma field to be able to withstand it or to exist in that structure, in that environment. So in that case, you're still under the influence of these plasmatic fields. And if one is under that influence, then maybe one is not able to use it in a harmful manner. Maybe it just automatically is compensating, you might say.
Just like, or you could look at it in this way, the deuterium, as you're making the deuterium, and it becomes your outer part of the harder part of your shell, which would be your exterior, wherever you place that exterior of yourself, that can be impenetrable. You don't have to worry about people penetrating yourself anymore. With negative, it's yourself. We're trying to, just think about if you created something for yourself, and the deuterium is as strong as diamonds, and you're inside it. You're part of that structure. You're inside that structure, and that's your craft. Man, would you feel protected? Would you feel wonderful? Would you feel personally empowered? I think so, because this way, I don't see how maybe that's why he wants us to have control of our souls, because once you have control of your own personal soul, then you can go from there. Because like I said, if you're not in control of yourself, and you could think bad things, I think, could happen to you, greedy things and all kinds of things, and that's what you don't want to have happen. And I can understand where Mr. Keshe comes from. So that's a big leap for this whole foundation. If people start thinking that, well, if I do this, the next step is the golden roads of paved of gold, and I'm making them for myself and not sharing them with anybody else. I'm the king of my own castle. Man.
Yes, but that's precisely when things start to collapse in that mindset, and that's why the what do we call it, the plasma fields, in order to feel the fields and actually interact and so on, one can't come from a place of the physicality. One has to come from a place of the essence-based form, the essence-based perspective. Otherwise, you have no way to control the situation. You have no interaction. So in other words, it takes an open heart to interact with the love energy. Otherwise, there's no such thing really in those realms as hate energy. There's only love energy or absence of love energy, because there's no duality really from that positive perspective, moving forward positively from this moment to the next moment to the next moment and so on. There's no room for any negative stuff, so it's just a field of positivity moving forward, the same as in with a spaceship, and how it's explained how the fields have to push forward many kilometers, maybe hundreds of kilometers ahead of the spaceship as it moves through space.
I have something here that I don't know if this will help or not. I had an experience where essentially I linked up with God, and in that moment, and I had the white. I believe, based on what Keshe has described in terms of your soul expanding and seeing white light, I had that experience of surrounded by the field. So if that was indeed my soul, that I was in the physicality of myself was inside my soul, in that moment, all the cells of my body became unified. Now, previous to that, I had been pumping energy into my body, and I'm going to make a correlation here with the planet in terms of what Keshe is trying to do, in my opinion. But as I was pumping energy into my body, I reached a certain threshold where the rest of the cells, so at first it was sort of like a concentration in the chest, and then at a certain point it kind of tipped, and all the cells kind of flipped over, so to speak. It's almost like the intensity of the energy was so much that they could resist, I suppose, but they didn't really want to resist. And then at that point is when the field expanded outward, the white light around me, this kind of thing. I can get into more details. I'm trying to keep it kind of short and get to the point that ties in with Mark. But in that moment, when God approached me, it was because, in my opinion, the cells of my body were more in harmony with each other in a state that is normally not. Normally I'm disharmonious. The cells of my body are they're completely ignorant of the other cells around them. They're disconnected. They don't understand that they're part of a collective, the human body of me. And in that moment, they were all linked up. They understood that they were part of this totality of the human body, me. And I believe the universe is the same kind of thing. So in that moment, when I was in that state, when I was in that field, that bubble, we'll call it, we'll assume it's the soul, and I was inside my own spaceship. I had no pain. I had no hunger. I was more in the moment. I felt love beyond what I can describe. It's far beyond what a human being is capable of from God in that moment, in that field.
Let me ask you quickly, while you have that memory, do you have any memory of having to put up any shielding or buffers, or was it more like you could just absorb any, what we normally would call negativity or other influences from the outside? Did you have to buffer against that? Did you have to put up your shields? Or was it sort of the unconditional love could just absorb that and let it pass through, more or less? I'm trying to establish sort of this two ways of dealing with things.
In that moment, such a thing doesn't exist. the idea of negativity and harm and all. I mean, that is not even in your awareness. You're just in that moment. I was in the field of unconditional love. Nothing else mattered. It was irrelevant. But going back to the point real quick, in terms of like, I didn't have any pain. I wasn't hungry. You know, the kinds of things that we talk about these technology being able to do. If I had desired to maybe manifest something, maybe it's possible I could have manifested something, even though that was not my desire at the moment. I'm saying that you need, I'm trying to tie it back to what you're saying, Mark. My perspective is that it's possible, in order to achieve the miracle level crazy stuff that is talked about using the physicality approach of the materials, when you build a coherent field that's strong enough to get those effects, you may not be able to do any harm with it, because it may be tied in with the totality in a way that's more harmonious. Meaning, if it's disconnected, you can't get the effect you want. If it's connected, you get the effect you want, but because it's part of the totality, it's more in harmony with everything. You can't really do anything wrong with it. You either get one or the other. You either get no result, or you get the result you want, but it's linked in a way that's not going to be harmful. The other point, real quick, I want to make, and then I can stop talking, is that, in my opinion, what I experienced with my body, all the cells. Again, I was doing a meditative walk. I was to trigger this. I was doing a meditative walk, pumping energy into my chest, building the energy, and at the same time holding non-thought. These were the three things that I was doing that triggered the effect. Um, as I said, the threshold of cells got to a point in my body where it was very concentrated at first in my chest, and then it started to spread out very rapidly. I believe the same thing will happen with the planet if each individual works on themselves, as if the planet, we are all cells in the body of the planet. If you get enough of a threshold of people that operate in this manner, it will flip the totality of the planet in terms of the population. Now, the population that doesn't want to experience it, let's say the very evil people, they cannot, if they don't want to participate, they don't have to, but the field effect will be so overwhelming to them that it's probably going to be impossible they're not going to be able to ignore it. Let's put it that way. They're going to feel it. And they can choose not to participate, but it will be so potent. I would be surprised if they could stand against it.
Yeah, if everyone else is running around with a smile on their face and they aren't, they're not going to feel so good about themselves, probably.
Yeah.
And if Caroline has her way, then we're all going to be looking in the mirror and smiling. So this is the new mode of operation, it seems, for humans.
Did that make any sense, Mark, or did that help, or did I just confuse you? Or
You helped to confuse me.
Okay, no problem. Sorry about
that. No.
Is there
we're on the same lines. I think we're all on that path. Everybody else, goes in a different way, but I'd like to say thank you, because just another confirmation that some of these materials are definitely going to come in handy for us to work with, because as humans, I think we're still hands-on, and as we move away from, we definitely will move away from these material things, because it'll be a natural progression. I mean, look what we're making here now. We wouldn't have made these things 5 years ago, and we're almost done with these. These are at the end of the line, like Mr. Keshe said. They're, for some people, they still look at it like, wow, that's pretty weird looking. But to us, it's like, oh, that's no big deal. We got a couple of coils here and a capacitor there, and a couple and some GANs, and we're in the probably the final stages of these, because it's just going to take a few more little tweaks here and a few more little tweaks there before it'll all be very clear to us how to work with these things, because they're feeding us energy to be able to think clearly how to work with them.
Yep, soon we'll be able to identify 90% of the main reactor engine combinations of the universe that are used in space travel ships and that kind of thing, because we can just look at it and go, oh yeah, oh I see, they pump the GANs through here, and the fields operate this way, and of course this is the Starship configuration underneath here, and you know, because we're starting to analyze things and look at things in terms of the interrelationship of these different parts and so on, and in the fields that are involved, not just the parts, but the fields of the parts, and even if it isn't the real fields that are involved, we still project what it could be, what it should be, what it might look like, what it you know, according to our calculations or according to our feelings or our instincts or our mental abilities or whatever, then we have these impressions that we get, and it's referenced by the actual stuff that happens in the universe that's apparently real, that we see in front of us, and it is scalar, so it's in the big scale and the small scale. We see it on the nano level and atomic level, we see it on the macro level, and in the universe and the galaxies and whatnot. Alright, Mark, let's have a look at your unit there. It's showing off its loveliness, so
oh, did I tempt you?
Yes, indeed. It's better than looking at my face on the screen here yakking away, so we have something to refer to here. And well, this is actually sort of a bare bones skeleton of your fully clothed unit, I suppose you might say, eh?
Yes, it is. It's a scaled down version of it. You see the little guys that I made that are all. So this was my idea of the part of the three outriggers eventually that I thought I would have to make. One of the three towers that would have surrounded the big one, the real big unit. So.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
But then what we're looking at, I modified this because if you recall about 2 months ago, we talked about I wanted to make an experiment where I could make GANs from plasma. If you remember that I wanted to try to make GANs because I don't use power when it comes to making all my GANSes. I just use the air bubbler and time. And all my GANSes are made, you know, and I wash them, and they're, you know, I follow the all the Keshe protocol when it comes to doing the GANSes and the nano coating. Washing is so important when it comes to this. And I did some things before. I didn't even know I was washing it, and I thought I was doing it wrong, but I never liked the idea of having the caustic on it. So when my very first beginning started steaming these, the night that I would steam it, even though the steam cooled down, I just pulled them out and dipped them in distilled water. I didn't really care about waiting for them to, you know, build. Armin called it a rapid release way back in the day, and I still do it, and I still get a nice nano coat. I know for sure that none of my nano coating has any caustic in it, caught in the right from the very beginning. Because you got to remember, when you're nano coating, you're going coating after coating after coating. So, you know, if you don't I thought if you didn't wash after every coating, you might get some of that caustic trapped in between the layers. That was just my oddball thinking. But anyway, I digress. So what you're looking at here is it's just a 3-stacker unit, and in the middle I inverted the middle one to where it's a it's a flipped unit where we have the small one on the horizontal or on the vertical, and I have the larger. I'll come in a little closer in a minute on the maybe I'm not saying that right, but one goes up and one goes down, on the flat. So, I was working with these capacitors in different forms and different, materials inside them and everything. And I made like 10 of them. And every time I took readings off of them, you know, I could take a positive and a negative reading off of each capacitor. And that told me there that I wasn't getting any type of a short out of it. But I made 10, but I had 2 of them that read in reverse. Like if I put the clips on positive on the top and the negative on the outside wire, it would give me the reading for the capacitor. You know, it was only a, you know, everything's in millivolts. And I have them all written down. But 2 of them would not read out on the positive side. They were always in the negative. So I reversed it, and they gave me the reading the correct way, but reversed. 2 of them reversed, and it made me mad because I had 2 of them that weren't simultaneous with the other 8 of them. And it was funny. Caroline had a story that she told about the GANs, the nicotine GANs that the guy made in Germany for her. And she got it all the way home, and she took the box out, and the box was wet on the bottom, and the GANs fell, and she realized it did not want, the GANs knew that it did not want to go, and because it probably would have hurt her. She realized that. So that story told me, hey, they don't want to be the other way. And then when I started putting the unit together, I needed 2 of them to reverse the polarity so that I could get the figure 8 in this. It was so bizarre. After she told the story, it just made so much sense to me as to when I went to wire this together, that the 2 of them could actually reverse from inside the capacitor to the outside capacitor. Because like I said, the outside wire that I have, I always get a negative read on it, and the pin on the inside, I always get a positive read on all of them, except for the 2 of them. So that told me that from an inbound to an outbound, so at the very beginning of my unit, I had a reversal, and at the very end of my unit, I have a reversal. So I don't know if you, I don't know, it's hard to picture. It was easy. It was hard. It's hard for me to explain it, but it was easy for me to picture it. But it all went together to where I don't have any open ends on any of the, it's a complete feed. It takes power. Right now I'm running it at like 10 volts, and there's no sparks, there's no smoke, there's nothing like that. And there's a reason why I have it at 10 volts. And I can get it in a little bit closer, and you can ask some questions about it, and I can explain, you know, unless there's somebody else that has something else that needs to show it, that's fine too. But there's some, you know, some detailed things if people would like to, if you'd like to see, or anybody else, I can take the camera in and can kind of take a little bit closer look. Sure,
we want to go on an adventure inside your machine. What was it called, that movie, Fantastic Voyage, where you go inside the human body and they were traveling around and so on? Here we go, yeah.
Well, let's see here. Let's go here first. Let's go to the top first, go a little bit higher. Well, I should show you here. There's the power supply right here. Now, those things never show, but it's 10 volts, and it's not even near an amp yet. And I'm only losing on the meter here 10 volts, but it's given the meter's giving me a 9.89, so I'm only losing a little bit, you know, on the readout. Does that make sense?
Is the orange meter on your output or input, you mean?
Well, on the unit here,
Yeah.
How would you? I don't know how. Where would you?
What is it measuring? What is the orange meter measuring?
The orange meter is measuring 9.89.
Where is it attached to though? Where are the leads attached to? Is that what's coming out of your unit?
Yeah. So you got the black, the negative here.
Okay.
Out of the power unit, and then the negative for the pickup here for the orange. And then you have the red to red. So you think I can put it anywhere and it reads out the same, just as long as it's on the right part of the unit.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So I could take a reading on for a positive reading, you know, where this is. I can take a reading to where this will stay this number here anywhere on a positive reading where I have the positive and the negative. But if I change it, then, you know, then you'll get the negative sign.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. So does that make sense electrically? Otherwise, if it wasn't wired correctly, there would be a short, right? Or there would be a greater loss of power is what I thought. You know, there wouldn't be a flow of power because I'm putting actually 10 volts through and I'm reading out. I'm only losing, you know, like I said, it's 9.80, 9.81. So I'm losing about 20 whatever, 20% of that. I don't know what that means, but you know, it should read 1010, but it's just off. If it goes up another 80, 85, it would be 1010 all the way across, and then it would be perfect flow, right?
Well, it's not unusual to have some sort of resistance when you measure these things, especially at the lower voltages and whatnot. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I've already had it up to 31 volts,
mm-hmm.
and it matches out.
Right on. Yeah.
So, and I'm not getting a short. So that just tells me that there's no short in the system at all. That, you know, there was a short, it should be sparking, it should be smell like an electrical short in it somehow, some way.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. These here are just little, I made these capacitors in a couple of different forms. Some are just made, like this one here is made with, the core is it's all the wire is 14 gauge wire, copper wire, nano coated. So the core of this one here at the beginning, I just chose this here to be the beginning. You have to have some place to be a beginning, and the way it loops around, I chose the whole unit to be the top unit and the bottom unit as a positive source, and I chose the middle unit as the negative source. And the way I decided that, or the way it's wired out, is all the positive feed is going through the top wire, and it's touching the core, going through core, and then the core, you know, the wire drops down all the way down to the bottom, so that it feeds the. I'm sorry. I should have said it this way first. It starts here, goes through the three top capacitors, then it dives into the top magrav, inbound magrav, loops around, then outbound, and then drops down to the middle. And what you're looking at the top here, I don't know if we've seen it the last week or that's months now, but it was my eggs. I had these little plastic eggs. And now we know to work with CH3, and we're trying to get tritium out of the middle of those. And I got a method to my madness. Maybe we'll talk about that. But anyway, so my goofy thinking was, I like the idea of silicon sand, because sand and we were told that crystals have great power. Well, silicon sand is crystals. It's the purest form of crystal you can get. I was going to go to the store and buy a quartz crystal and bust it up, but the guy from the geology, he said, just buy, Michigan has some of the best sand around, and that's the purest sand. It's beautiful quartz sand. I said, well, where do you, he said, just go ahead, you can get it in. So I bought some quartz sand, and so I filled all 3 eggs with the quartz sand. And then
Mark, where'd you get your quartz sand? Like an aquarium place or something? Or?
Yeah, like aquarium place.
Okay.
And was it correct in thinking that sand is quartz?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not all sand is quartz, but some sand will be quartz in different types and so on. And yeah, you can do a study of all the beaches of the world, and each one has their particular quantities and qualities of not only quartz but other types of semi-precious stones, gems, and other types of rock and so on, of course, as well.
So that gave me the idea to put them in the eggs to see what. So for the memory's sake and the all the good qualities that come along with it. So then what I did was, since we learned that we have to try to get the separation between the 2 different types of ganses, what I did was maybe I should get the other one to make it easier to see what they look like. This was my original prototype. So what I did was, can you see that? All I did was just put a ring around the outside. So the inside is filled with CH3, and I have different types of CH3s so that I could get different effects. So I chose 3 different, one a bio salt, one a Himalayan salt, one a potassium, magnesium, potassium CH3. I have 3 different types of CH3s. So each egg has the different potassium, the bio CH3, and the Himalayan CH3. So then what I did was, each one of the outside rings, I used...
Could you lower your hand a bit or raise the camera, because we're getting out of view there. Thank you. Okay,
sorry about that. So each one of the rings, what I did was, the eggs now were completely filled with the sand and as much of the CH3 that I could possibly get in it, because the sand took a lot, and I kept on shaking it to try to get as much to fill in as I could. Then what I did was, each one of them, say this one was the bio salt inside, I put the Himalayan salt outside, all CH3, and then on the outside what I did was I put just a little bit, maybe 5 drops of zinc oxide, just to get the conversion to go, so that that should always put just a little bit of zinc oxide. And some of my zinc, so it's pure, it's all pure zinc. So each one of them, I'm hoping that that's what gets the rotation started. Because like John said, with the different CH3s, if I can start to pull the carbon bond off that hydrogen, which that's what's inside here is the C, the H, and if the 10 amps can start to pull that, that's my thinking anyway.
Could you lower your hand? We need to see your egg. Thank you.
Oh,
it's a beautiful egg, but you keep raising it up and tempting us with it there. No, it looks like an egg from space. It's great. I love it.
So my idea was that if there was enough of these CH3s in the same vicinity, and like he said, the not the deuterium, the tritium will start to form once that C bond starts to decouple from that. And he said it took about 10 volts for 2 weeks in that system that he made. So this is just a playful thing. And I just thought, well, man, wouldn't that be a great idea if I could just get my maggraph to start to pull that bond, that carbon bond. And then I thought, well, there's got to be a stronger carbon field for that carbon bond to go to. So I thought, well, because I made one of these capacitors with just this one back here is just a carbon rod, just a small piece of carbon wrapped with a nano-coated braided wire, just a small piece of braided wire. And then I put the paper towel around it, or the handy wipes, that Sandors. I like those wipes that he suggested. They hold moisture better, and every one of my capacitors are left open on the top so that they could. Actually, I thought maybe that if they were left open on the top, that they could actually absorb water. If they actually needed water, that the water could be absorbed by that tissue that is highly absorbent. That's why I thought he used it. So that's why I didn't cap off the tops. I left them open so that, except for this one. This one was a different experiment, and I can explain that in a minute. But that's all the other capacitors are open top capacitors. So, but to get back to my original thought here was, you needed a higher order of carbon in order to strip that carbon. It had to go someplace. So this, I'm hoping that this carbon rod is a higher field in order to pull those carbon molecules away from these hydrogen fields. Does that make sense to you, Rick? Is that what maybe I'm adding that, and I'm not clear about that.
Could you maybe just raise the camera a little bit? We can see the carbon rod there at the top and so on. When you're pointing, I wasn't quite sure what you're pointing to. So the carbon rod's the one with the that's got the clip attached to it there?
No, it's the one actually behind it.
Okay.
I have 3 on the top, and actually 4 in the middle and 3 on the bottom. So the front one was made with just a zinc a zinc plate, just a tightly rolled piece of zinc with just a nano-coated piece of copper wire gone down into it, and then the zinc and the paper towel rolled together, and then the tin foils on the outside of each one of them. And that would be the paper towel is the separation. That's why it's, and I thought maybe they should start sparking or something, but it hasn't sparked. I'm not getting any burning, and I thought maybe that the paper towel inside might dry up, and then sparking might happen. So
that's one of the risky things with dealing with that kind of setup with the paper towel deal. Even the oven paper, what do you call it, parchment paper that they use for baking, I noticed that if you use a little torch or a lighter and put it on the paper, it reaches a certain point, and then it just catches on fire and burns like normal paper. So it's a bit dicey that way. But the thing about it is, if everything's functioning properly, then you shouldn't have hot spots or overheating and burning stuff and so on. A lot of that dependent on the conditioning, I think, and the how much load is on the actual unit, and how quickly that load's put on according to that conditioning phase, you might say.
So we'll see. I'm just going to let it, operate for a while, because like I said, John said it took a couple of weeks for the process to happen. I don't know if I'm going to let it run overnight without being attentive. I just started up the power, so we'll see. I don't know if it's building fields. You say, do you feel the fields? Since I put it all together, The only thing I can say about it is it just seems like I feel something in my solar plex. Different, like when I get a little bit closer to it, it feels a little bit different. When I get a little bit farther away, not so much. What that feeling is, maybe I'm just excited that that I have something and it's actually working, I think. Who knows?
Well, it's your baby. You've given birth. That's what it is. That's the feeling in your belly. You've given birth.
I got an experiment going finally.
Well, it is a connection that we do feel, and I believe and know from experience that it's often felt in the gut area, in the solar plexus, this attachment, as opposed to feeling it through the heart or chest or eyes or brain or some other location. So it seems like these tendrils go out that attach to our solar plexus. I mean, it's called a solar plexus. It's the sun and it's the center, sun center. So our solar plexus is actually our sun center of our essence in a way. So like that is the sun center of your apparatus. So it makes sense you would have a connection between what we're looking at and your solar plexus, especially with all the zinc and tender loving care you put into all the twists and turns and coatings and cuttings, and there's a heck of a lot of work gone on in what we're looking at here. I mean, it looks kind of funky with this kind of gooey stuff that's coated over everything and whatnot, but it actually represents some very clear ideas and consistent ideas with the way the universe works and whatnot. So, and you've applied everything as meticulous and true to the teaching as you can, Mark. I can't find flaws with your logic and the way that you've done things.
Well, I thank you, Rick. That means a lot to me because, like I said, I never wanted to ever overstep my boundaries. I always wanted to whatever I could do to help promote the positivity that Mr. Keshe tries to teach each and every one of us every week. It's a privilege and an honor, and I hope I've done things in a correct manner.
Well, the bottom line is, if your solar plexus is responding, then you've done things in the correct manner.
Well, they're jumping.
Right? Because it's a two-way thing. I mean, building these different devices that we built, the 4-reactor Starship configuration a couple of years ago, and got that going. It's the same picture you see on the live stream logo for the live stream channel and so on. And we actually were working with feeling these combinations and trying to connect them with the other combinations that are working on other parts of the planet and so on, and still do. And this is sort of the miracle of the whole process, is that not only do our devices change and our ideas for the devices and so on, but we change. We actually are, we forced to think about and become more sensitive to our own sensing apparatus, you could say, our own reactors inside, and we have to start contemplating and thinking, what tools do I have inside myself that are available? How can I become more sensitive? How can I feel the fields? Or do I feel anything? Or was it in my imagination? Is it all in my imagination? Maybe you people are all in my imagination too, and the whole world is my imagination. Anyway, we can get pretty far out there with some of the thoughts and the impressions we have and whatnot. But bottom line is, if you feel it in your gut, then that's about as real as it gets, I think. And and then we can learn to, of course, make that stronger, and we end up becoming more and more sensitive, and at the same time more and more closer we can come to this unconditional, the unconditional love, essentially, that's at the core of all of the stuff that we do. It's has to be at the core of our intention and of our wish for what we have to occur, what we want to happen out there in the world and inside of ourselves. So I think that, you know, everybody in this group, in one way or another, has expressed that that wish. So I think that's really important. And no matter what we build, if you build it with unconditional love, it could be the funkiest looking thing in the world, but it will have that effect of affecting others in a beneficial way, and definitely affecting ourselves in a beneficial way. I mean, is there any other way that something should be built in the world, really, other than with unconditional love? What condition would you like to put on the things that get built? We give complete unconditional love to our new cars that we're building, except for, well, there's these things and these parts and this part and that part that we didn't quite give unconditional love for. Like I hear, actually, for example, in the Tesla car company, they the workers on the cars get together and basically give a little blessing to each car when it goes out. They celebrate each individual car that gets produced, apparently, and which is different than you know, General Motors, which most of the workers are probably cursing the cars by the time they go out rather than blessing them. And they don't have the, you know, a group get together, a group feel good get together at the end. They have a couple of quality control people that maybe check things, but they don't do it as a any kind of blessing type ritual, or any kind of, not a ritual exactly, but a, you know, just a simple offering that this device that got, you know, manufactured goes out the door with the blessing of the people that put it together. As an extra boost, sort of, that to give it some strength in the world. It adds to its magrev fields. So anyway, congratulations on the birth of this one, Mark. It's another beauty. And
Thanks, Rick. It's just, you know, it comes with love, and it comes with fun, and everything we, you know, to this point and this point forward, I'm just very thankful for everything. The time that I put in is time for everyone. I give my everything to everyone with peace and love. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the global peace mission here that the people from the associated with the Keshe Foundation are on till August 2nd or 3rd, at least, and trying to get the world leaders to sign the World Peace Treaty. And of course, a big part of that effort is trying to arrive at that place of peace within ourselves, try to come closer to our archetype of having peace within ourselves, so that gets transferred naturally to the world at large and all our interactions, and so on. And part of that effort was led by, or suggested by, Caroline, who suggested that we use the mirror, like pretty much everybody looks at themselves in a mirror in the morning to confirm they're still alive and don't have things that the public would say that, oh, look at so-and-so, they've got something all over their face that they didn't wipe off from the day before or whatever. So we look in the mirror to start off our day, and she was saying that to look in the mirror and do a little exercise of basically just calling yourself beautiful, and that, you know, you were completely okay and so on. And that this was to be sort of a little exercise to smile into the mirror, that this idea of calling yourself beautiful in the mirror should make you smile and kind of, you know, laugh a bit perhaps. And so different people are trying that and other exercises to sort of activate this part of ourselves that's maybe a little more compassionate and a little more tolerant and a little more loving, and possibly a lot more of all the above if we can key into that as our mode of operation through the day. So maybe if everyone on the planet did that, especially our leaders, then we'd be in a better position as we go along. Alright, I digress a bit there, but sometimes digressions are the main topic. Where else do we want to go with this? What else you got there, Mark? What else you want to say about your device and your eggs and whatnot? I like the idea of the crystal, the crystal egg, which is essentially what you have with the crystallized sand being, you know, primarily quartz crystal, all jammed into an egg shape, which is perhaps a better shape than a plain sphere, especially when under the effects of gravity. And then you've got the liquid in there to take up any space in between the crystal. So in effect, the crystal's now in a vacuum environment rather than the air environment. And so yeah, I think you better unplug that thing at night, because you never know what could happen. You might come down to a hole in your roof and roughly the same size as this piece of plastic, you know.
And I haven't even really explained the little colored balls that are sitting there.
Okay, yeah, because they're not egg-shaped, are they? They're round.
They're a little bit smaller than a ping pong ball. I just wanted something light, and what I did with that is I just drilled a little hole in there, and I just put the same type of materials that are in the eggs in those to be a free forming. If they feel like moving, or if they feel like rolling, or if they feel like, you know, if there's enough. The reason why I did it is if there's enough ability in the unit to pull the C bond off of that CH3 in there, there's just a little bit in that ball, and I'm just wondering if it would be light enough with leftover hydrogen in there to lift any one of those up off that plate. That would be my hope, and that's my experiment for those that are that little ball that's sitting there.
So the little balls have the sand in them too, is that right?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, I wanted them as light as possible. And I just wanted them to be there, and, you know, with just a little bit of different types of the CH3. All three of the different types of CH3s that I have in each one of the eggs are in the, you know, like one has the Himalayan CH3, one has the biosalt CH3, and the other one has the potassium and magnesium CH3. And then all three of them, I just put, like I said, a couple of drops of zinc oxide for the connection, for both, the harmonious connection that the zinc oxide provides for our planet. It's the connector, it's the muscle, it's the tissue, it's the bridge to, I think, is the connecting point. You don't need a lot of it, I don't think, but just by using it in my spray and in on myself, I realize how important zinc oxide with the CO2. The CO2 is so readily available that I think that it's, like I said, it's readily available, more readily available than the zinc oxide. So that's why I just put a little bit in each one of them. So if the unit starts to pull from any one of the balls, or, there's actually different places where different elements and fields can start to either be developed or disperse where as needed. And when I take the power off, it holds power. It drops down after a while, but it'll hold itself for about at least an hour with a half a volt, and that's where it will stay. It stays charged. It doesn't go down to zero. I mean, it stays alive, at a very low rate. And like I said, some of those little capacitors the best one I had was, it was reading consistent 600 millivolts, which is almost a half, just a little bit more than a half a volt. That was my best one. And then I had a 5, I had a 3. But actually, if you added them all up, the millivolts, each tray equals 1,000 millivolts, if that makes sense. So each capacitor, for some reason or another, they're within like 20 millivolts. So, but in its entirety, it was the top. Each one of them, like I said, one was like 980, one was 1,020, and the other one was 1,010 or whatever. But so I just, in equal parts, they all kind of equaled out. I have 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, and 4 in the middle. And like I said, the ending of them starts, the end is in the middle, and the starting point is at the top. And the top feeds the bottom, and all power goes to the middle. And the middle is the pull point. It's the strong. I believe that should be the strongest field. It has 4 posts in order to make the field. So, like I said, as time goes on, we'll see. I've been excited around it for the last couple of days. I don't know what it can do or how it's supposed to do or what, I don't expect it to do anything. I believe it can do a lot. My feeling inside me feels like it can do more than what I'm looking at. And I think that's my intention with it, is that something's going to happen. Something will show itself to me with observation. And I think that's what it's all about, is when we observe things and watch things and, take notes, that's where we, go to the next step. The pHs and all the different things that we've learned are all starting to make sense to us now. And it's just a matter of time before, like we said, one of us in this group is going to have the door open for us. We'll be lucky enough to share it with each other. And I hope it is one of us. And I know it's going to be one of us. And I can't wait for the day, because when we do, we'll share it with all of us.
Yeah, good point, Mark. Yeah, because playing around with these experiments and generating ideas amongst each other can spark some really serious possibilities here. So looking forward to that in the next while. Actually, Guy and I are setting up a new lab space, and it'll be interesting what comes out of that, because once we get bouncing off of each other and playing with products, it could be quite an interesting time, in spite of the physicality stuff of it. In a way, it's I mean, that's what we have to deal with at this time and place. We have the physicality, we have this thing we call a body, and the whole set that goes with that. So in a way, we should take advantage of what we know on different levels, and apply some of the teachings, whether to just confirm for ourselves or to confirm for others, and with the general attitude of helping others. And that's when I think that's when the really cool things could be developed, with that attitude of helping others. It gives one a necessity, an urgency, you might say, or necessity to perform, to come up with something because it is needed in the world, rather than just something out of our idle curiosity, or because we just want to try something to have something to stick in the living room or something like that. But if it's done with intent to help the maximum number of beings in our world, whatever that world is, then that's got to be automatically put you in a position where not only the information becomes more easily available, but you'll find that coincidences start lining up, and you pick out, just the right piece of plastic tubing at the Home Depot or hardware store where you happen to be going to, or someone you run into has some particular part that you're looking for and asks you if you needed it out of the blue, and this sort of thing. So I think if we work with coincidence and with our hearts, then these kinds of projects could actually blossom quite well. And sometimes they may not, end up producing these effects that we want. It may not go through the roof, and maybe that'll be disappointing to us. Some people want their devices to go through the roof. That would be a sure sign of success. But on the other hand, even if they don't do anything, something happens, some movement is caused inside of us when we create these things and attach our emotions to them and work through the processes of understanding to get to the point of knowing, that putting a little ball here, or a little egg here, or a coil here, it has significance, it has symmetry, it has a certain way that things are done, and each of us has our own particular ways of doing those ways, but they are also guided under certain universal laws that we're trying to tune into inside of ourselves and reflect it outside of ourselves. And if we conform to those laws, then we're sure to succeed in one way or another. And if not, we can always tear it down and use the parts for the next invention. Okay, so what else about that, Mark?
Well, we'll see. Now at least I know that, this was just a stepping stone for me. And what I was going to say about this is, we're trying to measure the effects of this thing with things that are measured. We don't even understand what we're, I can just, in my imagination, what if I'm just producing a beautiful, brilliant light coming, now that it's connected, into the universe, and it's saying exactly how I feel. But I don't even know that because I don't have any way to measure it or tangibly hold it or see it or feel it. But the beautiful thing is, it could be happening. It could be transcending time and space, and I don't even know it. But it's made. It's here, and it's having, like you said, Rick. It's having an effect, and some of those effects that it's having, I have no idea. I have no way of measuring it, or the only way I can tangibly tell anybody what's happening right now is how I feel inside me. There's no tools, there's no methods, there's no calculus or anything like that. This is a whole new science, and the beauty of it is, as we learn more, we'll be able to look back and we'll be able to say, did you see, look at that, and he did that, and that. Look at that caveman. That old caveman, he put all those wires together and broke that hole in the field, and it was allowing all the light to come in again. That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, it's definitely projecting out to whoever is in the sound of our voice at this point, because wherever the sound of our voice is usually where the video is also playing. So they'll have an image and an impression of that image, and your voice and your wish will be carried with that wherever this is seen. And it might possibly be seen for many years if everything holds together on the planet and in the internet and in the worlds of interest of people and whatnot. Perhaps these little meetings will be played for years, or perhaps it'll disappear in a week or two and not too many people think about it, let's say. But I don't think that's the case. I think this is a case there where this kind of impression, it goes out and people either go, like, what is that ridiculous looking thing, or this guy's crazy, or it'll be, wow, what a inspired, brilliant piece of work, that I could see all the reason for each one of these parts, and you've guided us through your logic and your reasoning and so on over the last year or two of these kinds of devices that you've been playing with, especially with the plastic tubing and whatnot. So, I mean, it's full range of impressions of the human impressions of, if you would give a picture of this, just a picture of what we see on the screen now, to each of the 6 or whatever billion humans that are out there, each one of them would have a different impression, and 99.9999999% of them would not have a clue what this would be, and the other 0.00001% mostly wouldn't know either, and they would be the ones that associate with the Keshe Foundation, know some of the ins and outs of these capacitors and coils and ganses and all this stuff that we talk about in this thing. And so, but yet these other 6 billion, they will get an impression, and some of them will giggle and go, oh, that's really neat, or they'll go, oh, that's really cute, or they'll go, oh, that's totally ugly, or I don't know what this is. It's, like, it'll be full range, right? But the fact is, it will produce an impression that'll be out of the ordinary for sure, because it's not something you see every day. You don't go in the supermarket and go and pick one of these off the shelves. You don't go into your Stereo Mart and oh, do you have a Starship Magrev reactor available? I'd like to pick one up this afternoon. That's just not happening. I'd like the Mark 10. We'll call it Mark 10 because each one of your devices is a Mark. We'll call it Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark. You're probably up to Mark 10 or something here with this one. And I'd like the Mark 10 model, please. Do you have that on the shelf? You don't have it in stock? Or where can I get one? There must be some place in town that's got one of these things. No, that doesn't happen so much. It's a unique individual thing where you've put your stamp on it, your signature, your frequency into it, basically. And we can identify with that. And most of us that are involved with this group, especially the Keshe Plasma Reactor group, that's the name and that's the game. And so this is a classic example of someone's reactor system. That is one of the as Mr. Keshe says, there's as many types of reactors as there are stars in the universe. So this is like one star out of our universe, you could say, and it's one that we recognize because it's got the stuff that we recognize as in this group we've come to learn to get to know. Anyway, I kind of went on, rambled quite a long bit on that.
We appreciate your thought pattern here because you're our fearless leader that gives us cohesion. All of us. We have all put, not by your choice, but by all of our choice, we have pushed you up on the platform. We love you so much, and we just want to send positive energy to you because you are the thread and the needle that holds all this together. I'm telling you, brother.
Well,
my hand is so often. You know what? You don't have to do any of this wiring and this hard work because I'm coming to get you the minute it works. We're celebrating. We'll put our feet up on the beach. We'll have a nice cup of coffee, and we'll say, "Yeah, that was well worth it."
And it may not be that far away as well. That things are rapidly moving in the world, and I am no longer surprised. It seems like all the wishes that I've wished for in my life are starting to come true, to blossom in the last few years, I would say. So we live in really interesting times now, and we get to have our deepest wishes be fulfilled. And part of that wish is the wish to be able to travel in space and travel on Earth too in a more elegant way than we have been with our machinery that gets us around now, or our things we call cars and airplanes and trains and ships and whatnot. These are very antiquated ways of moving around in the world of matter, and I think we can do a lot better as humans, and better and cheaper and easier, and let's make it a joy to travel to the other side of the planet in a few minutes instead of a chore that takes a day or two and you're exhausted literally at the end of it because of all the exhaust from the airplanes and the airports, and just the sheer trip of it all is it's no longer required in my estimation. I think we can move to a new world that's got all the benefits that we have dreamed of, and it still has the security that we need so that we don't have a bus being thrown from the other side of the world at us and that kind of thing, which technically this kind of technology might be able to do if someone had the intention and could actually formulate it in the presence of the fields of this thing, which might be difficult to do. It might be hard to do things in anger if you're in the presence of a piece of equipment that can put out those kinds of fields that we're talking about. It seems to be almost mutually exclusive. In fact, Mr. Keshe has talked about it in terms of, the what do you call it, the entry into this spaceship, the what do they call it when you're in the International Space Station? They've got or in Star Trek, the place where you come into the ship and exit the ship. Help me with this, somebody.
The airlock, Rick, perhaps?
Airlock, yeah, like the airlock part, where you go in and basically you would have to pass the inspection even to go into the ship. To have it accept you, you would have to have a certain amount of acceptability to that space, which would mean that you would be not too far attached to the physicality and not have too much in the way of negative emotion that you're dragging around with you. In other words, you have to leave your baggage at the door, you might say. One's emotional baggage needs to be left, and physical baggage probably might have to be left at the door, and only the things that are acceptable on the GANs and plasma level gets to come through the door of the spaceship in order to do the traveling. So you might have to leave your gold rings and jewelry at home.
But not our bodies.
The body might be all right. In certain spaces, as Mr. Keshe has said, that you might come to, if you're traveling in space and you have a body, like what we call a body physicality realm, then there may be fields that are encountered that are too strong for that physicality realm, in which case it may dissolve the physicality, in which case we may revert to our essential self or essence, or the next level that's left after the physicality, and carry on in that regard. And then if we feel the need to reconstitute a physicality, then essentially we do that according to our wish and end up on some planet somewhere, and all of a sudden we hear a sound and it's something like wah! And it's us being born.
Yeah.
Yeah, or made into some other entity, and maybe we would want a life as a hummingbird or something, I don't know.
As a co-creator.
As a co-creator is a good choice.
If you're willing.
Especially if, yes, well that's the thing. It's all sounds good until you are the co-creating and find out this is what I have to do for eternity. Oh my goodness.
For now.
A little more. And now, and now, and now, and now. It's always now. And you're always creating.
That's the part, I think that's the part that is the hardest part for humans to understand, is that the now is always the now. It doesn't matter. The now is the now. And the loop will, the continuation of the now will always be. We just
yes.
are just not aware of it.
And being in the now does not mean being in the now that I just talked about as the now a few seconds ago, or the one a minute ago, or the one I just talked about, or the one a half a second ago. It means one now, which is now and now and now, and you can break it down into smaller and smaller and smaller time periods, but you're always a little bit removed unless you really are totally in now. And that means a lot. To be able to get there is requires dropping all the baggage, basically, and that's a difficult task for most of us humans, because we like to carry at least a handbag or our clothes and a few necessities. You know, it's nice to have.
Put it this way, Rick. You know how to shed those ideas? Go to a nudist camp. Shed your first time.
Well, that's true. That's true. And
It's such an embarrassing feeling when the first time that you have got to present yourself in a way that no other people do. When you stand in front of beings with no clothes on in the sunshine of the day,
yeah.
they tell you to drop them because everybody else is.
Do you know where I learned that, strangely enough, Mark?
Nope.
Nearby to where you live in Flint, Michigan.
I live about an hour away.
Right, so you know. So I went to, as I've talked before, I went to a place called General Motors Institute, which is actually no longer called General Motors Institute, but in those days it was. And that was back in the heyday of the 70s, being 1973 to 1975 when I was there. And I think it was in 74, I believe, that streaking became popular. Now, you know what streaking is, but a lot of people, especially if they're younger, they might not even know what it is. But streaking was, I think it started with somebody in wasn't it in like a football game or somebody, where somebody, you know, ran naked down the football field.
In Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
Michigan State football game.
Yeah, and then this started this fad where people just stripped off, literally butt naked, and would do things like just they do things like called a fire alarm, where you and your friends would be naked. You pull up in your car to a stoplight, and everybody gets out of the car, runs around the car, gets back in, and takes off again. Or people would just be, you know, caught in public. They'd be just running through, and streaking it was called, running naked through public, essentially. So this fad caught on to the university where I was at, and on the campus and whatnot. So my buddy and I, we just ended up trying this, and yep, we took our clothes off and ran down the halls of the campus and into where the you know, some of the classes were held and so on and so forth, and just ran through and ran back. Other people were doing this, and there was this reports of this popping up through the whole campus, actually, and there's some women involved with this university, and not that many at that time. Only 5% or something were women at that time. I remember they actually streaked as well, but they left their bras and panties on, so they kind of cheated, but they gave it a go anyways. And you know, this was all totally acceptable at that time for somehow, and it was just this opening in the universe where that became popular, and all across America at that time it started popping up, and on different university campuses especially, and just all around. You never knew when it would happen, and it was very liberating to both do it, and like you're saying, to go to a nudist camp or whatever and spend time there would be very liberating too. You'd realize, you know, this whole thing of clothes is pretty silly when it comes right down to it, and so on. If we're all the same being, especially, then hello, what are we really hiding? Something that the same being has never seen before, or whatever. And you know, a lot of questions come up when you start to sort of look at things from that point of view. And it was all completely innocent at the time. There's no, you know, sexuality wasn't even introduced, really. It wasn't as if you were getting a glimpse of someone or something. It was no big deal.
It was a feeling of liberating yourself.
Yeah.
To show people that I am present.
Yes, exactly, Mark. Yes. Very well done, yes.
And it was fun. It was fun.
That it was okay to be present and not have to put your clothes on, basically.
They stifled that feeling and they repressed it. And do you remember how the big repression came from that reaction? Or you know how the people, the oppressors, what they did was they went and shot children on the campus of Ohio to quell all this stuff down. The burning of the bra, the marches, the rebellion.
Right. Yes, people were rebelling against the Vietnam War at that time. That was part of this feeling of love that was coming out. This this feeling of oneness with others and so on. And that was being suppressed. And yeah, there was the song by, what's it, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, 4 Killed in Ohio, I think it is.
Yes, indeed. And that's how, they gutted us. It was such a peaceful movement. Peaceful people laying around, sharing water. If you had a dime or a dollar to share, who cared?
Yeah, that's right.
Gas or cash. No ride will get you that far.
Yeah, and people were talking about free energy and free love and free everything at that point. And the National Democratic Party, the NDP, that's now the opposition, one of the opposition parties in Canada here, they were talking about a guaranteed annual income and freeing up the laws about different things and so on. This was all, back in mid-1970s we were talking about here. And then all of a sudden things shut down, because what happened in 1975, you recall, there's what was called the energy crisis. And all of a sudden, the automotive sector was in trouble because they had no vehicles that were good on gas. They were all gas guzzlers, essentially, other than the Vega, and that was a hopeless case in itself. And it was things were collapsing because of all the oil business and so on and so forth. It was, but that may have been, when you think about it, that may have been sort of a smokescreen to make sure that whole movement didn't go more forward than it already did. I think they were trying to repress that free feeling because people were just feeling too good.
Oh, it was a really nice time, and like I said, that was such a freeing feeling, and that's what I think this technology is. We're trying to free ourselves from the shackles.
Yes, that's right. And when you think about it, if you look at even the old pictures from back in the 70s and so on, and people whooping it up and really going for their freedom and that kind of thing, but it was a different freedom then. It was personalized and also with group and thinking of others. There was communities that were established where people get together and live together in communities and so on that were off grid and all this kind of stuff. But it was still very much a personal trip, you might say, and it didn't quite incorporate the world picture into it, and it certainly didn't emphasize the off-world picture, the universal picture. I think that's what's making this movement different, is we are including the universal picture as well, that picture that our world peace is not just so we can all get along with each other. We're shooting for world peace so we can get along with each other, so we can get off the planet and get along with those that are out in the universe and the other life forms and so on, so we can establish our place in the universe, not just our place in our community or in our nation or on our planet, but actually in the next step are establishing our presence in the universe. And I think because we're now taking into account that totality rather than the more limited view of the 60s and 70s and whatnot, then I think it's got a much better chance of taking off this time around. And plus we have the internet and mass communications and so on. At least so far, keeping fingers crossed, that may come to an end at any point, because we have to be careful of what authorities would like to do in case of declaring war and that kind of thing. They would probably shut down a lot of their privileges for internet. But being humans the way we are, we will find ways around it for sure, because we want and need to communicate with each other now. And that's the bottom line. That's not going to get stopped. That's not going to get messed with, basically, because anyone does that, they'll find that we will reestablish communications very rapidly in whatever way we can. So it's a really a beautiful, encouraging world that we're opening up into, and there's many points that are coming together, many points of light are coming together, you might say, with both the financial system, the religious groups are looking more that they're coming together and establishing some sort of peace amongst themselves. And you know, the nations of the world just came together a couple of weeks ago and formed a non-nuclear pact, or at least 121 of the nations came together. And so all we're missing now is the major industrial nations. So that's coming along, actually. They're starting to see, and we'll probably have a demonstration at some point, that the technology of weapons is obsolete, and it's just no longer workable. It's no longer worth it to, you know, put together billions of dollars for these aircraft carriers and other things that you know, the U.S. just launched a new ship for their Navy, and I think it was an aircraft carrier just last week, I think it was, and the response from Russia is it's I forget the exact term, but basically they said it's a great sitting duck for the new technologies. It's, you know, this is the thing, is what can we possibly produce as a weapon that's going to withstand the change of attitudes that people have now, that we don't wish to have weapons and use them. And the use of weapons makes those that use them look like fools, especially if they use them and it gets turned against themselves because they don't pay attention that the technology's changed and we have capability. There may be countries that have returned to sender technology that can send weapons back to where they came from. And that should be enough to, if that happens once or twice as a demonstration, then that should be adequate to establish that weapons are obsolete, outdated, and in fact dangerous to keep weapons. If you have nuclear weapons, your population is going to start to say, wait a minute, we don't want these. If we launch these weapons and they use the return to sender technology and they send them back to us, why would we want that? So you explain to us why you keep these weapons and why you would want these weapons to be turned right back on ourselves.
You gotta be kidding me. People would actually say, you know, that is, can you believe that people actually want to spend their money, have their government spend money when they would actually know that the facts that this could come back to them? That would, to me, that is a perfect. That's what I'm saying when I hope with all my heart and soul that we have enough in this technology, that the technology that we figured out to have something to say to them. return to sender. Have a nice day. Put your family out in front first, and then I would be more than glad to eat from the table. But your family eats first. You and your family and all of you that say yes to this terrible buy a gun, shoot a bullet, kill a family. You go out in front first, and then we'll follow. You eat that poison first, and then we'll follow. Well, please, let's have this technology. That's what I mean. Peace comes with that. I don't want to say power, but you got to have a little kick in the butt to say, hey, you people are done. Done. Do not do this to us anymore. The game is over. Return to sender. Thank you very much. Good night. Have a nice night. Bye-bye. I'm sorry, Rick.
Yeah, essentially. And what if we had technology that, I mean, you mentioned guns, and, you know, like someone comes up to you and says, you don't have any guns? Oh, I got, 5, and I got 3 of them on me now. Yeah, that's a good line. And it's true, some people would, actually. And some people would if they could. And so on. So we have these armed weapons out there, and lots of them. And Detroit is probably the armed weapon capital of the world, maybe in competition with Chicago or something, but or at least in
such a competition.
Yeah.
Come on.
But think about it though. What if we had the technology that, for example, when people walk into a movie theater, they go through this instead of a metal detector. You go through a bullet deactivator, and basically it's a plasma field that deactivates any firearms material, like powder, black powder or whatever.
Sucks the carbon right out of it.
Yeah, sucks the carbon out of it, doesn't hurt humans, and it only works in this tune for that field, so that people can walk into a movie theater and enjoy their company with others, not feel they have to carry an arm to arm themselves in case some nuthead jumps in with a weapon and starts threatening or using the weapon, which has happened so many times in theaters and other public places. But what if we made all public places where people get together in a group would be under the umbrella of this field that will not allow the presence of weapons within it?
We're standing at that edge right now.
We are, and people are at the edge of accepting that, whereas they wouldn't have accepted it in the 70s. It'd be too much of an intrusion on their privacy, and we wouldn't have the technology to start with, but we wouldn't have even thought of that type of technology back then. But now we have the capability of thinking about it and thinking along those lines of creating these protective fields around, certain areas. Like
it's not even harmful. It would be so natural to say a plus, a negative field of carbon, meaning that if you had a field that would absorb this amount of carbon. If anybody walked through it, humans have this much, and we're all a carbon-based thing, and all of a sudden this human has X amount of more carbon on them. Say goodnight to that X amount of carbon.
Well, it would work on, instead of, like, the carbon in our body would be in the GANs state, but the carbon in the bullet would be in the matter level state. So perhaps it would work on the carbon matter level and turn it into GANs, essentially. So it would also be effective. Get this: any carbon particles lodged in our lungs that might cause cancer and so on would also be dissolved in this field. It would turn it into GANs, and our body would naturally deal with it. And so you go through a healing chamber, essentially, as you entered into this room with other people, and it would also take care of any matter level carbon in bullets or other types of, you know, someone had explosives on them, explosive belt or any of these terrorist type things, it would just dissolve it into GANs, and they would stand there, they'd be dripping. They'd have some stuff dripping out of their explosive belt, and they would pull the trigger, but nothing would happen, and they'd just be embarrassed because they just, you know, made a puddle on the floor in front of instead.
So maybe, yeah, I know you have to get ready for your session here, so let me just end by saying this. The little device that we're looking in front of us here, that was my principal thought was that if we had a place for these different fields to be either created or gone to, GANs is very smart. These plasma fields are so smart, they organize themselves in ways that we have no imagination. We're only learning about what they do. But if we give them a place in order to organize themselves and start to do the things that they do best, that's where we're at this point. That's what I'm trying to create, is a condition, like Mr. Keshe says. Once you create conditions for different things in plasma field technology, you might not exactly understand what you're doing. And that's why he's taken us through these steps and baby steps. But all these things they matter to us because they're creating these fields, like you said. I might be creating a field right now that attracts XXX, or I might be creating a field that disperses XXX.
Or you might have created a field in XXX number of people out in the planet just by the description and visuals of this kind of object that we're looking at. So that's another way to look at it. So the effect goes out in many different dimensions other than the immediate space where this thing is in front of you there. It's affected me tonight talking about it, you know, sensing it and looking at it and through you and so on. It's affected my emotions, my things I talk about and so on, and all the other people here that are into this kind of thing, because we'll talk about it, maybe we'll show the picture to someone else or mention it somewhere and so on. All the connections are going out, these threads go out and into all these different directions that we don't normally see or think about.
Rick and everybody, do you remember Douglas when he went to the National Press Club in Washington and Mr. Keshe was invited via the video link to talk directly to the government officials? And I think the most important thing he was saying was that with a small ping pong ball full of GANs, plasma fields, floating in the ocean near the giant war fleet of aircraft carriers and destroyers and battleships, that single ping pong ball could simply disarm, like, and he gave the example of the Donald Cook, you know, just like that. Just a simple little ball floating in the ocean, and it created the necessary changes in the substances of the silicon chips and whatever else makes those battleships and planes and so on run. It changes them, like you said, Rick, into GANs rather than matter state, and they don't work anymore on the matter level. And it's just as simple as that. And I think the message must have sunk in because, you know, the seed was planted, and I think there's a lot of talk going on in the background, you know, about the effects of this plasma technology, even though it's not in the public. I think everyone in the highest places really understands it's checkmate to the old big giant aircraft carriers and the big jets. And another interesting thing quickly, I don't even know why, but it came across my path. In the Russian Moscow Air Show 2017, there was a I think it was called an Su-10 plane, military fighter plane, and it was breaking all the rules of avionics and physics and so on. It was flying, you know, as fast as any jet, and then all of a sudden it would stop, and then it would go up, and then it would do these rolls and flips and things and look like a helicopter, and had some kind of a motor in it that they didn't really tell the details of. But the way it was performing, everybody was gobsmacked by this performance. So we know the Russians have had a little bit of a go at plasma technology, and possibly they're building hybrids, you know, of aircraft with perhaps the help of plasma technology. Just a hint they're giving to everybody that, you know, the old style is gone and the new is coming. And I just thought that was all interesting, the way these things are all happening at the moment. Rick, you wished for no diesel, no petrol. I just saw the headline, Volvo and Britain has just cancelled. They just said, we're not having any more diesel or petrol engines, you know, in another few years. It's all gone. It's illegal. Stop it. You get on with electric or other technologies, or you go out of business, because we're already being sued. Massive lawsuits are coming on board, like you've said in the past, from people who have suffered the consequences of diesel fumes, sitting in traffic jams. The air is full of lead and all sorts of crap.
Yeah, they haven't even started the health lawsuits yet, and already all these companies are in major doo-doo. Mercedes just had to recall over 1 million vehicles recently for diesel problems, and now they have to change those. And Audi just is the latest one, another 600,000 vehicles involved in, and they are in big trouble with their stuff. Goes back several years, and all the diesel truck manufacturers are in trouble with it now. In fact, diesel's done. Diesel is totally, we're so done with diesel on this planet. It won't even be a second thought in a couple of years here. And that, to me, is such a major relief from everything for me. I'm so highly allergic to diesel, and many people are, and they don't even realize it, actually. The effects are subtle, and they can be very devastating. And I'm just amazed that it's all sort of come together in the last couple of years, where the Volkswagen fiasco, you know, came out, where they were cheating on their emissions exams, and it's totally billions and billions of dollars, and forced Volkswagen now to go to electric vehicles. It's forced all the manufacturers to go that way, which they had in the wings anyway. They were developing electric vehicles. So now Volkswagen has an electric vehicle that will be competition for the Tesla, the cheapest Tesla car. It'll be, the Volkswagen one will be cheaper, and there'll be competition there, and they'll be putting out millions of these things. And they'll also be trying to patch up their past reputation with the diesel and all of the health effects and so on. When those lawsuits start kicking in, then these companies are going to want to start giving and giving and giving to the public. They're going to start giving away vehicles to people to drive because of their guilt that they feel for their past actions. In order to repair the past, they're going to have to, and in order to incur the favor of the public and not be totally torn apart and destroyed, they're going to have to really put out, and that putting out means basically free transportation. That's what they're going to be forced into, and they'll find a way to pay for it through different ways, you know, advertising or whatever, if they'll find ways. But they're going to be forced into that. That's the way of the future, and I'm so happy. And this, to me, this is it's not just a small thing. I've had a thing for several years where I came to the conclusion, when you hear the term breath is essence, okay? And breath is essence. What does that mean? Breath is essence. Well, if you think about all the humans on this planet, that's what's been taken away from us, is our breath, in a way, our ability to just freely breathe without taking in all these toxic particles and different things that are happening and whatnot. It's hard, very, very difficult to get literally a breath of fresh air anywhere on this planet. I don't care if you're on the tallest mountain or the lowest valley, most lush valley in the world. It's still it's going to have remnants of these fields that we should not be inhaling, because we're done with that now. And I'm so happy that that's transitioning, and that to me means the essence is now being brought forth in the world, and it reigns, number one, and we're going to not put up with things that interfere with that freeness, that ability to breathe in more than one way, more way than one, let's say. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap things. Yes, your wish is your command.
Your wish is your command, Rick, and your command, and it's ours too. And because of that, that's why all this stuff's going on, because we wished it into reality, and now the material world is following just the way it should. It has no choice, because that's our wish.
That's right, exactly. And it may sound bizarre to some that, oh, they sound like a cult or whatever, but hey, anybody can have this wished for the benefit of others, and it's really easy to activate once you get it going. It's just, you give from your soul. It's so simple, so straightforward, so easy. It's just that it's so simple and easy that it's like the purloined letter. It was sitting there the whole time with all the secrets that people needed to know, and no one bothered to open it up and read it. So anyway, that's we're all progressing very well right now. I think it's an amazing time, and we're all coming toward this this singularity, as they say, and it seems to be rapidly accelerating at this point, and we are so fortunate, every one of us, to be at this time and place and position that we are in, whatever that is right now, because it's all perfect no matter where you are, no matter how bad you think it is or how good you think it is. It is a perfect position to be in right now, and there's even better positions to be positioning into. That's the thing about it, is there's the choice points are coming up, and the ability to move is much more fluid, much more easy to move, to make movement and go into higher levels where we elevate our own conditions and our own essential beingness, and elevate others, more importantly. So anyway, it's a time where we push the elevator button, and there's only the up button. So anyway, I should start pushing the other button, the off button here, because I need to take a little break before the next Blueprint for Peace teaching coming up in half an hour here.
I'd just like to say thank you, Rick. You and all of us have created the condition for change. And it's time for you to have a little break, because we keep pushing the peace for change. It'll happen. It'll happen. It's happening now. There's no stopping it. The lid is off. You know, we used to think that the lid was, you know, we keep opening up the lid and looking inside, hoping. But now the lid is so far open, I don't think that they can put it back on. Everybody's looking inside. There's too many people looking inside. And that's sometimes right. I think that's why Mr. Keshe keeps wanting to say, oh, hold on, people, slow down. We got a lot of people that got to be reacclimated to the situation. So it might seem foreign to a lot of outside of this group that are going to watch this video, that see what they've seen tonight. Just absorb it. Don't freak out over it. It's something that they should enjoy, and it's very easy, because there'll become a point where we'll be able to teach all of us to be able to do this. You know, we're just organizing ourselves now in order to teach more people to have the same feeling, on and on and on. So the teacher's got to go now.
Yeah, and we get to learn ourselves how to multiply that feeling and multiply and divide it and give it out and take it in and all of that. It's learning to be like pipe fitters for this fluid called love. You know, we're all in these rooms fitting pipes and attaching and making all the connections and learning how to work with this substance. So thank you all very much for tonight's participation, and I'd like to call it to a close now, and I'll see you again next week at the Keshe Plasma Reactor group. Alright, so I'll end the live stream.